Our guests today are two of my favorite people. We have Bob Lamm, who's a partner and chair of the governance and securities practice for Gunster down in Florida. He's been in-house at 6 companies, so he's been around the block. And then we have Stacey Geer, who's been in-house at 3 different companies. And right now she's Executive VP, Chief Governance Officer, and Deputy General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary at Primerica. I'm Brock Romanek, today on Zippy Point. So Stacey, when Sarbanes-Oxley was enacted, and after a little period of time and people realized that internal controls, the CEO, CFO certifications were the biggest deal of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act for companies in terms of their processes, in terms of getting up to speed. And this whole culture of certifications arose up so that the CEO and CFO could get more comfortable about what they were signing. And then, those processes were built, and then I don't think there's been any programming, any conference panel discussions about that process. So can you walk us through sort of a typical timeline and process for collecting sub-certifications?
Sure. So hitting kind of the practical side, typically sub-certs are obtained closer to the end of the 10K or 10Q process. We collect them maybe a few days in advance, maybe a week in advance, just to make sure we have them and can get the people, no one's out of the office. And then we hold them in escrow until the certification meeting that I'll cover in a few minutes. And obviously someone who signs a sub-cert knows that if there's changes to the circumstances, they've already signed it, they need to let us know so that, if they're unable to sign it or no longer can stand by what they certified to, they would need to let us know that. Every company is different as to who you get a sub-cert from or how many you get, but generally you want to get them from the people who are closest to the process, kind of own the topics that the disclosure covers, and have specific substantive knowledge. So examples might be the chief operating officer. You might want to go instead to business line heads if you want to go a little bit, one step down, maybe the head of a foreign subsidiary, the tax professional, general counsel, securities lawyer. Those are the kind of people who would typically sign a sub-certification. I know some companies have a policy that you can't change anything in the sub-certification. I mean, I think if you can't sign something, you need to explain why you can't sign it, and the company needs to work through the issues to fix the disclosure so that you can sign it. But obviously, if someone signs it and has any kind of qualification, that would need to be looked into before the report is. Sub-certs will also vary since who signs it's going to vary. We're a mid-cap company. We have them signed by about 6 people. And the process is really owned by the head of risk and compliance. So that's the person who sends the sub-certifications out to everyone. For us, all the sub-certifications are identical, and they cover topics such as the lack of any material misstatement or omission in the underlying document, compliance with SEC requirements, notice to the disclosure committee of any events that might be material, lack of knowledge of any fraud, absence of any 8K event that hadn't been reported, and acknowledgement that the sub-cert will be relied on by the CEO and the CFO. And then, at least in our case, we have a couple people that need the securities lawyer, governance professional, and our tax professional have additional certifications attached to ours that speak specifically to kind of those regulatory areas.
I know in those early days, I heard horror stories about occasionally there'd be, since it was a new requirement, that someone would get a sub-certification and be like, I'm not going to sign this. And then the company had to decide whether they're going to essentially let that person go if they weren't willing to sign it or not. That was tough.
I think companies have gotten past that issue, obviously. It's been now a number of years, but I mean, it's kind of, it goes with the role and responsibility that people are assuming is that, the way they're written is that if you're not comfortable, then you need to make sure that you've informed the right people and made sure that the disclosure is accurate. If we haven't had any situation where someone who's signing a sub-cert says that something should be disclosed in the document and it's not, and therefore they're not sure what to do, that just hasn't happened because everyone's working together to get to the right answer.
And just to embellish on what Stacey said, I think that there's an education process. For example, a public company acquires a company that was privately held before. Depending upon its significance, you may want to have somebody from that new subsidiary certify. If they don't know what it's all about, you got to educate them. That obviously doesn't wait until the last minute. Some of the larger companies that I've worked for that had extensive global operations had some of the issues that Stacey alluded to. Not really understanding what does the SEC mean? What is it? What are we certifying to? And occasionally getting into heated discussions about demands for explicit indemnification agreements in respect of certifications. But I think Stacey's right. For the most part, those have gone away over time.
And it's serious business, a Section 906 certification, the
Yeah.
Department of Justice is involved. And if you're
I've worked for those companies.
CFO, you can go to jail. I don't know if you can go to jail for signing a sub-certification. I would doubt it.
I don't think so.
But
I mean, unless it was really part of a massive fraud,
well, yeah, you're going to jail anyways.
I've worked for them too, so that's.